When Rosalie Harrow was 7, death entered Harrow House quietly, beneath the scent of lavender water and cooling candle wax. Her mother left no grand jewels or estates in her name. She left a silver-bound recipe book, its pages crowded with measurements, flowery fingerprints, and affectionate notes written between instructions. Whenever Rosalie opened it, she heard again the voice that had once called her cherished. Lord Edmund Harrow wandered through grief like a man crossing fog. 2 years later, he married Lady Beatrice, an impoverished widow whose modest gowns and gentle manner persuaded everyone that kindness had rescued him. Beatrice brushed Rosalie's chestnut curls, listened to her read, and called her daughter. Hungry for tenderness, Rosalie believed her. For 1 year the house softened. Then Beatrice delivered twins. Cecilia arrived first, red-faced and furious. Julian followed minutes later, a son whose first cry seemed to shake centuries of dust from the Harrow portraits. Edmund laughed beside the cradle, overcome by the knowledge that his name now possessed an heir. Within months, Beatrice received emeralds, additional lands, and every household key. The keys changed her. Rosalie's bright rooms near her father's apartments were required for the twins, Beatrice explained. She was moved to an eastern chamber where frost silvered the inside of the windows. Her music lessons ended. New gowns became altered cast-offs. Money preserved by Rosalie's mother quietly disappeared into accounts established for Julian. Before Edmund, Beatrice remained warm. Behind closed doors, her voice sharpened. "You should be grateful," she told Rosalie. "A girl without beauty, fortune, or useful connections must earn the roof above her." Edmund saw calm dinners and assumed peace. Rosalie could not bear to deepen the sadness already carved around his eyes, so she swallowed each complaint. Silence became the price she paid for his happiness. Julian grew observant and uneasy. Cecilia grew beautiful and cruel. She learned that Rosalie could be punished without consequence and called her plain, unwanted, and fit only to be traded. Rosalie answered by retreating to the kitchen, where cinnamon, warm butter, and her mother's handwriting created a small country Beatrice could not conquer. At 23, Rosalie attended a hunting gathering held beneath chandeliers bright as winter stars. Among the guests stood Dowager Duchess Octavia Blackwood, severe in black silk, lamenting that her son had rejected every eligible bride in England. Beatrice's smile acquired a dangerous sweetness. "I could persuade Duke Nathaniel to marry the least desirable woman in this county," she said, looking directly at Rosalie. Octavia's gaze followed hers. Amusement stirred around the card table. She accepted the wager. Rosalie refused when Beatrice announced the arrangement that night. For once, her voice did not tremble. Beatrice responded by placing Edmund's debts before her and claiming rejection would disgrace the family, destroy Julian's future, and perhaps kill her father with shame. Thus Rosalie entered the engagement believing herself not a bride, but payment. Nathaniel Blackwood was 32, dark-haired, clean-shaven, and disciplined enough to make stillness intimidating. He understood that his mother and Beatrice had engineered the match, and his first courtesy possessed the chill of duty. Yet he did not mock Rosalie. That alone surprised her. During their engagement celebration, a kitchen maid slipped while carrying a silver tray. Glass shattered, blood brightened her palm, guests recoiled from the disturbance. Rosalie crossed the ballroom without hesitation. She knelt amid broken crystal, wrapped the wound in her own lace handkerchief, and murmured until the girl stopped trembling. Across the room Nathaniel watched. Afterward he asked Rosalie why she had risked ruining her gown. "Gowns do not feel pain," she answered. Something guarded in his expression opened. Their courtship changed by degrees. He brought her wildflowers instead of jewels because he noticed she preferred them. She made him laugh over rain-spoiled pastries. He silenced Cecilia's insults with one level glance and began seeking Rosalie in every crowded room. What had begun as a cruel wager became, to Beatrice's displeasure and Rosalie's wonder, a promise freely chosen. Neither of them noticed Beatrice watching from the gallery. Her fingers tightened around her fan as affection ruined the punishment she had so carefully arranged. On their wedding night, Rosalie stood inside the candlelit bridal chamber, touching her mother's recipe book and daring to believe she had finally reached a home where she was wanted. Outside, Cecilia intercepted Nathaniel. Her jeweled smile gleamed as she leaned close and whispered, "Did no one tell you? The physicians believe your new Duchess can never give you a child." Nathaniel regarded Cecilia as though she had carried mud into a chapel. "My wife's private affairs do not concern you," he said. Cecilia's jeweled smile faltered. He entered the bridal chamber without repeating her accusation, yet the words followed him like smoke. Rosalie stood beside the fire in her ivory gown, one hand resting upon her mother's recipe book. The uncertainty in her gray-blue eyes banished his anger. Whatever bargain had brought them there, he would not begin their marriage by making her defend herself against another woman's cruelty. For nearly 2 years, tenderness proved stronger than suspicion. Nathaniel took Rosalie riding beneath the black pines, where she laughed whenever his solemn horse stole leaves from her hat. Together they restored an abandoned glasshouse, clearing ivy from cracked panes until sunlight returned to the tiled floor. On rainy evenings, she baked cinnamon cakes while he read beside the library windows, deliberately mispronouncing French words to make her correct him. Blackwood Castle changed around them. Flowers appeared in stern corridors. Servants stopped whispering when the Duke approached. Nathaniel, who had once treated affection as an undisciplined weakness, began measuring his days by Rosalie's presence. But the nursery remained empty. At first, Rosalie folded away each disappointment privately. Then Octavia began counting months aloud. Physicians arrived with leather cases, bitter tonics, and cold questions. They examined Rosalie as though searching for a flaw in porcelain. Nathaniel dismissed one after the man spoke about her without addressing her, but another appeared the following week at Octavia's invitation. Society proved less discreet. At a spring ball, Cecilia surveyed Rosalie's gown and asked loudly whether Blackwood had ordered furniture for its nursery or surrendered the room to dust. Laughter stirred behind painted fans. Nathaniel crossed the ballroom. "The nursery is closed," he said, "but our gates can open immediately for unwelcome guests." Cecilia flushed. Beatrice guided her away, wearing the injured dignity of an innocent mother. By morning, rumors spread that Rosalie had concealed her barrenness to ensnare a duke. Nathaniel defended her publicly, yet invisible hands tightened around him. Trustees reminded him that his cousin would inherit Blackwood if he died childless. Political allies warned that estates, tenants, and influence depended upon secure succession. Octavia spoke of duty until the word sounded like a hammer striking stone. Rosalie noticed the letters accumulating upon Nathaniel's desk and the weariness beneath his eyes. She mistook his anger at the pressure for resentment toward her. The final physician arrived in winter. Chosen by Octavia, he conducted his examination and announced that Rosalie would never bear a child. She received the sentence without tears, which made Nathaniel understand how often she had already wept alone. He ordered the physician out. Neither Rosalie nor Nathaniel knew that Beatrice had purchased the verdict. In her locked desk lay the doctor's receipt and a letter promising him further payment when Cecilia became Blackwood's next Duchess. That evening, Nathaniel confronted his mother in the blue drawing room. "I will not discard my wife for an heir." "You speak as a husband," Octavia replied. "You must think as a duke. Then the title may pass elsewhere." Rosalie, approaching through the corridor, heard only those words and Octavia's answer, "She will cost you everything." She retreated before hearing Nathaniel say, "Everything without her is nothing." Near midnight, Octavia entered Rosalie's chamber carrying letters bearing Nathaniel's seal. The forged pages described a secret petition to dissolve the marriage and named Cecilia as a suitable future bride. "He cannot tell you," Octavia said. "He pities you too deeply. Leave before dawn, and he may preserve his inheritance without becoming the villain." Rosalie read Nathaniel's familiar signature until the ink blurred. Every childhood lesson returned. Love was shelter granted only while she remained useful. Believing departure her final gift to him, she packed one dress, a winter cloak, and the silver recipe book. At dawn, her carriage vanished into snow. Nathaniel returned from London hours later and found her chamber stripped of warmth. Upon the pillow waited a forged farewell claiming Rosalie had never loved him and had fled willingly. Octavia urged him to accept an urgent 5-year diplomatic commission before scandal reached Parliament. Snow soon erased the tracks of Rosalie's carriage, leaving Nathaniel no visible path by which to follow. He departed England carrying Rosalie's letter inside his coat. Behind him, the long empty nursery door swung open in the winter draft, while the mother who had separated them finally understood that silence could become a crime. Rain followed Rosalie to Harrow Castle, drumming upon the carriage roof. When the doors opened, she stood upon the steps, soaked and exhausted. Edmund descended without waiting for a servant and gathered her into his arms. "My child," he whispered. "What has he done to you?" Rosalie could not answer. Nathaniel's forged farewell lived in her memory beside the forged letters she believed he had written. Each version declared the same cruelty. She had been loved only until love became inconvenient. Before Edmund, Beatrice performed outrage beautifully. She ordered fires lit, broth prepared, and Rosalie's former room reopened. Cecilia wept over her sister's disgrace with dry eyes. Only Julian watched Rosalie as if he suspected that the truth stood somewhere beyond everyone's reach. For several weeks, Harrow Castle offered borrowed peace. Rosalie baked from her mother's recipe book, filling the kitchen with orange peel and warm sugar. Julian began joining her before breakfast. One morning, while grinding almonds, he said, "I saw what they did when we were children. I told myself silence meant I had not helped them." Rosalie closed the silver book. "Silence always helps someone, Julian." His face reddened. "Then I am sorry it never helped you." Before he could prove his repentance, another bargain entered the house. Lord Percival Ashford arrived in a black carriage bearing orchids and an ancient title. At 61 he possessed vast estates, impeccable manners and no surviving child. He asked Edmund for Cecilia's hand, explaining that Ashford required an heir. Cecilia refused before the orchids wilted. "I will not bury my youth beside an old man," she hissed. Beatrice's gaze moved toward Rosalie. Within days Percival was invited. Beatrice described Rosalie as patient, accomplished, and shamefully abandoned by an unfaithful husband. She concealed the physician's verdict that she herself had purchased. Rosalie rejected the proposal. Beatrice responded by spreading forged letters across a table. They suggested Rosalie had committed adultery during her marriage to Nathaniel. "If these reach society," Beatrice murmured, "your father's name will become a joke. His heart is not strong. Julian's future will be stained beside yours. You have already taken my first marriage. Then you understand how easily I can take what remains." Rosalie looked through the window at Edmund walking beneath bare trees, believing his family restored. She remembered the debts once placed before her and understood that Beatrice had discovered the perfect chain, Rosalie's love for others. She accepted Percival. Their wedding was quiet. Percival neither mocked nor frightened her. At Ashford Manor, he gave her the garden keys, praised her blackberry cakes, and promised no insulting tongue would survive beneath his roof. Rosalie did not love him, but after years of uncertainty, his courtesy resembled shelter. She began hoping respect might ripen into companionship. Then Percival discovered the old rumors. His kindness did not disappear at once, it narrowed. Every conversation returned to succession. Physicians were summoned. Calendars appeared upon his desk. He spoke of children not as lives to cherish but as proof that neither age nor gossip had defeated him. Rosalie recognized the transformation. Once again, her worth had become a question another person expected her body to answer. When she learned she was expecting a child, disbelief silenced her. Percival laughed, rang the estate bells, and ordered the nursery painted blue. Gifts arrived before Rosalie had felt the first movement. For a season, he became gentle again, reading inheritance documents beside her chair and speaking confidently of "our son." Rosalie rested both hands over the life beneath her heart. She wanted to correct him, yet feared disturbing the fragile peace. Secretly, she promised the unborn child that love would not depend upon a name, title, or gender. Winter sealed Ashford Manor beneath snow when her labor began. Wind shook the shutters while lamps burned through the long night. Near dawn, one infant's cry filled the chamber. Then came another. Before the astonished physician recovered, a third voice joined them. 3 healthy daughters were placed beside Rosalie, Lily, Grace, and Margaret. Their tiny faces seemed to hold every tenderness she had once begged to receive. Rosalie laughed through exhausted tears and drew them close. Outside, bells proclaimed their birth. Servants embraced in the corridor. Percival remained beyond the nursery door, motionless beneath the portrait of his dead ancestors. When the physician emerged smiling, Percival did not ask whether Rosalie was safe. He stared at the 3 pink ribbons in the man's hand and whispered, "Are you certain there was no son?" Rosalie named her daughters before Percival entered the nursery. Lily for courage that survives winter. Grace for tenderness offered without condition. Margaret after the mother whose silver recipe book rested beside their cradle. When Percival finally appeared, he stood at the threshold as if disappointment were contagious. "They are healthy," Rosalie said. He looked toward 3 sleeping faces. Health does not continue a name. He provided nurses, gowns, and a generous nursery allowance, ensuring no visitor could accuse him of neglect. Yet he never lifted a daughter from her cradle. His care existed only upon ledgers. The girls grew like 3 flames in a shuttered house. Lily climbed furniture before she could pronounce caution. Grace studied every expression and offered her ribbon whenever someone seemed unhappy. Margaret followed Rosalie through the kitchens, solemnly carrying a wooden spoon and dusting her curls with flour. Their laughter unsettled Ashford Manor's silence. Servants softened. Rosalie rediscovered songs she thought grief had stolen. Even the gardens appeared less severe when three figures raced between the roses. Percival hardened as they brightened. When noblemen visited, he ordered the nursery closed. At dinners he called the triplets the first attempt, never using their names. Rosalie challenged him privately, but his answer remained the same. Ashford requires a son. Affection cannot alter inheritance. Nor can inheritance teach a child she is worthless. They will marry. That is usefulness enough. Rosalie understood then that his early gentleness had been hospitality extended to a possibility. Once she produced daughters, the door closed. Shortly before the girl's 4th birthday, she discovered Percival examining papers beside the nursery fire. He had arranged to send them to a distant household on the northern coast, where they would be raised out of sight. "You will cancel this," Rosalie said. "They make you sentimental and disobedient. They make me their mother." Percival rose, his posture rigid with fury. "Choose me and comfort, or leave with those useless girls." 9 words severed the final thread between them. Rosalie crossed to the nursery door and opened it. Lily stood outside with Grace and Margaret behind her, all three silent enough to reveal they had heard. Rosalie knelt, gathered them close, and looked over their heads at Percival. "I choose my daughters." She did not tell him another child already stirred beneath her heart. Beneath a winter cloak, Rosalie concealed her pregnancy while packing. She took no Ashford jewels, only clothing, her mother's recipe book, and money Julian sent with a note promising she would never stand alone again. At dawn, Rosalie and the triplets departed. Percival did not come downstairs. They settled beyond Bellmere in a neglected house with leaking windows and a rusted gate. One room at a time, Rosalie reclaimed it. She patched curtains, scrubbed soot from the hearth, and turned the front parlor into a bakery. The first morning only 6 loaves filled the shelves. Their fragrance drew laborers from the road, and by sunset every loaf was gone. Rosalie worked before sunrise, kneading dough while the girls slept together beside the oven. As her pregnancy became impossible to hide, Lily carried kindling, Grace counted coins, and Margaret stamped crooked flowers into pastry crusts. Poverty demanded everything, yet their house contained more warmth than Percival's mansion had ever possessed. During a violent rainstorm, Rosalie's labor began. The midwife arrived through flooded lanes while thunder rattled the window panes. Upstairs, the triplets waited beneath one blanket, holding hands whenever their mother's footsteps crossed the floor. Near dawn, the storm quieted. A newborn's cry descended through the house. The midwife placed a son in Rosalie's arms. He had dark lashes, a determined mouth, and fingers that closed immediately around hers. "A boy," the woman said. "Lord Ashford finally has his heir." Rosalie looked at the child and felt no triumph over the daughters Percival had rejected. She wept because he breathed, because he was safe, because none of her children would ever need to earn her love. She named him Theodore. For 18 months, the bakery prospered and the children grew beneath Rosalie's protection. Then a black carriage stopped outside during afternoon rain. A solicitor entered, removed his wet hat, and presented an envelope bearing Percival's seal. Rosalie read the notice while Theodore slept against her shoulder. Percival had learned of his son. He did not request reconciliation, nor mention Lily, Grace, or Margaret. He demanded custody of the male heir Rosalie had hidden from him, and intended to take the boy before winter. Rosalie met Percival's threat with the calm of someone who had already surrendered too much. She hired a solicitor. When the case reached court, Percival's counsel portrayed her as a disobedient wife who had concealed the rightful Ashford heir in poverty. Rosalie stood without jewels or title beside her name. She had only the truth. Then Julian entered carrying Percival's letters. The correspondence proved Percival had expelled Rosalie and the triplets before Theodore's birth. One letter called the girls useless burdens. Another instructed his steward never to permit them through Ashford's gates. Julian's hand trembled as he surrendered the evidence, knowing Beatrice would consider his honesty betrayal. The judge refused to remove an 18-month-old child from the mother. Yet his warning chilled Rosalie. Percival remained Theodore's father, wealthy enough to petition again. For weeks, every carriage made Lily run to the window. Rosalie slept lightly, Theodore's cradle beside her bed. Then news arrived that Percival had died after his long-standing heart illness worsened. His will named Theodore heir to Ashford Manor. Control of the estate passed to trustees who regarded Rosalie and her daughters as embarrassments. They expected her to return, occupy a distant wing, and raise Theodore beneath their authority. She refused. Rosalie accepted only the lawful allowance belonging to her children. The following morning she opened the bakery as usual. Bellmere answered her courage with loyalty. Laborers bought spiced bread before sunrise. Families ordered blackberry tarts for christenings, honey rose cakes for weddings, and sugared violets for celebrations. Rosalie's mother's recipes traveled farther than her sorrow ever had. Soon, polished carriages arrived from London and waited beside farmers' carts. Prosperity did not make Rosalie forget hunger. She employed Mrs. Finch, discarded by a husband who fled overseas, Ada Price, widowed with 2 sons, and quiet Florence May, rejected from respectable houses because she could not provide references. Rosalie paid fair wages and never asked a woman to explain the ruins behind her. Within 2 years she purchased the Goldenstone Manor beside the bakery. Sunlight filled its rooms. The gardens yielded lavender, berries, and roses for her ovens. Most important was one enormous family chamber where the children slept together during storms, certain no locked door would divide them. The triplets turned 5. Lily remained fearless, Grace collected questions, and Margaret could shape pastry roses better than several adults. Theodore, 18 months old when Rosalie first fought to keep him, became the adored center of their conspiracies. Across the sea, Nathaniel knew none of this. 5 years of diplomatic service had sharpened his discipline and hollowed his warmth. He returned to England with honors, gray fatigue beneath his eyes, and Rosalie's farewell letter still folded inside his traveling case. He had never remarried. Pride insisted she had betrayed him. Memory refused to stop loving her. Cecilia visited Blackwood Castle before his luggage was unpacked. She claimed Rosalie had married a wealthy lord immediately after leaving him, ruined that marriage, and now lived extravagantly upon money gained through deception. And the Barren saint has become Bellmere's grand lady, Cecilia added. Perhaps you should congratulate her. Nathaniel heard the malice, yet bitterness made it believable. He announced that he would visit Rosalie and show her that 5 years had cured him of humiliation. Octavia went pale. Leave the past buried. Why? He asked. What else might rise with it? She offered no answer. A storm followed Nathaniel's carriage into Bellmere. He passed the glowing bakery, surprised to see Rosalie's name painted above its door. Beyond it stood a manor with rain shining upon every window. He climbed the steps rehearsing a smile. He would mock the woman declared barren, expose her comfortable second life, and prove that whatever tenderness they shared had been false. Yet beneath every prepared insult lived one question. Had she ever loved him? The front doors stood open to admit the evening air. Nathaniel crossed the threshold and stopped. Rosalie sat beside the fire, chestnut curls falling over a blue gown. 3 little girls nestled around her while a small boy ate from a painted bowl upon her lap. The room glowed with the intimacy Nathaniel had spent 5 years pretending he did not want. Theodore looked at the rain-soaked stranger, then pointed toward him with his spoon. "Mama?" he asked, "is that the sad man from your locked portrait?" Rosalie raised her eyes. The bowl became still in her hands. Nathaniel's bitter smile vanished, and the barren woman stared back at him surrounded by 4 answers. Nathaniel's prepared insult died before reaching his tongue. 4 children surrounded Rosalie. Margaret leaned against her shoulder. Grace held her sleeve. Lily watched the stranger with fearless suspicion, while Theodore guarded his painted bowl. Nathaniel looked from one face to another. The triplets were 5. For one irrational moment hope struck him. "Are they?" "No," Rosalie said, understanding. "All 4 are Percival's children." He had believed her faithless, crossed an ocean, and permitted 5 years to pass without searching. He possessed no right to resent the life she had built. "I came here to mock you," he admitted. "I know." Her composure punished him more thoroughly than anger. He glanced toward Theodore. "The physician said you could never have children." The physician lied. As did nearly everyone around us. Rosalie sent the children upstairs with their nurse, though Lily paused upon the landing to study Nathaniel. When silence settled, Rosalie approached a locked cabinet and removed his miniature portrait. "I waited for you," she said. "At first, every carriage sounded like yours. Every letter made my hands shake. Nothing came." Nathaniel drew a folded page from inside his coat. Time had softened its creases but not its cruelty. "You left this." Rosalie read the farewell. Her expression altered at several phrases. "Beatrice wrote this. She disguises her hand, but she always bends the final stroke of a capital R." Nathaniel remembered the forged letters Rosalie described receiving from him. Their separate griefs suddenly formed one design. Before either could speak, Julian entered carrying a rain-darkened case. He locked the drawing room doors and placed the case upon the table. "I took this from my mother's private desk," he said. "She discovered it missing this morning." Inside lay receipts recording payments to the physician who declared Rosalie barren. Beneath them were discarded drafts of her farewell letter, each colder than the last. Correspondence between Beatrice and Octavia revealed the remainder. Beatrice had warned Octavia that Rosalie intended to expose the original marriage wager, disgrace Nathaniel, and destroy the Blackwood name. Terrified of scandal and succession, Octavia had driven Rosalie away. Later letters showed doubt hardening into guilt, then cowardly silence. Nathaniel sank into a chair. His mother had not invented every lie, but she had chosen to weaponize them. A window shattered. Cecilia reached through the broken pane, seized the case, and fled toward a waiting carriage. Julian pursued her into the rain. Nathaniel and Rosalie followed as horses surged down the drive. The carriage struck a fallen branch and tipped against the orchard wall. The occupants escaped harm, but papers scattered through mud and rushing water. Rosalie turned toward her children gathering beneath the doorway. "Where is Lily?" Grace pointed toward the orchard. She ran after grandmother's silver book. It fell from the case. Rosalie's face emptied of color. Nathaniel was already moving. Rain erased the path beneath him. He crossed the orchard calling Lily's name while branches clawed at his coat. At the far boundary stood a ruined summer house, its roof sagging beneath ivy. A sob answered from within. Lily crouched behind a broken bench, clutching the silver recipe book beneath her cloak. Nathaniel knelt several feet away. "I saved Mama's treasure," she whispered. "And now I shall save hers." He did not seize her. He waited until she placed one trembling hand in his, then wrapped his coat around her and carried her through the storm. Rosalie ran to meet them. She took Lily, kissed her wet curls, and searched her frightened face. Nathaniel stood bareheaded in the rain, holding the recipe book against his chest. For one moment, Rosalie saw the man she had loved, not the duke guarding an inheritance, but someone protecting her child without asking whose blood she carried. Nathaniel offered her the book. "I should have searched for you." "Yes. I believed the letter because I was broken. You believed it because anger was easier than doubt." Her voice remained quiet, but every word found its mark. "You loved me once, Nathaniel. Yet when I vanished, you accepted the cruelest explanation because it wounded your pride less than searching for the truth." Lightning faded beyond the orchard. Nathaniel lowered his head, unable to defend what he had become. Rosalie carried Lily toward the warmth of the house without offering forgiveness. Behind her, he understood that uncovering 5 years of lies had been the easy part. Earning his way back to the family before him might require everything pride had once refused to give. Nathaniel did not return to Blackwood Castle. He rented 2 rooms above Bellmere's apothecary and appeared at the bakery before sunrise, dressed without medals or servants. Rosalie found him lifting flour sacks from a delivery cart. "What are you doing?" "What should have been done 5 years ago," he answered. "Remaining where the truth is difficult." She neither welcomed nor dismissed him. Nathaniel learned quickly that ducal authority could not command dough to rise. He burned 2 trays of rolls, delivered bread through relentless rain, and accepted Mrs. Finch's corrections without protest. Instead, they saw him carry baskets to elderly customers and scrub flour from the floor after closing. The children remained harder judges. Lily asked why he had not searched for their mother. Nathaniel answered without excuses. Grace requested a promise that he would return the following morning, then waited at the window to test him. Margaret pressed both hands against his black coat, leaving perfect flower prints, and declared that dukes wore foolish colors. Theodore called him the tall gentleman. Soon, the boy began toddling toward the window whenever Nathaniel's footsteps sounded outside. Rosalie observed everything. Nathaniel never asked the children to call him father or demanded gratitude for ordinary kindness. He appeared, listened, and returned. Slowly, suspicion ceased entering the room before him. His public reckoning began at the county magistrate's hall. Before trustees, reporters, and families who had repeated the rumors, Nathaniel presented Beatrice's records. The bribed physician confessed that Rosalie had never been barren. He had invented the diagnosis in exchange for money and advancement. Then he revealed another truth. Nathaniel's fever shortly before the wedding might have temporarily prevented conception. Rosalie had endured examinations, ridicule, and exile for a supposed failure that may never have belonged to her body. Nathaniel's face became stone. "You allowed an innocent woman to carry my shame." The physician lowered his eyes. Beatrice's reputation collapsed before afternoon. Edmund removed her authority over Harrow Castle and restored Rosalie's maternal inheritance, including funds secretly transferred to Julian. Cecilia's advantageous engagement dissolved once her family's fraud reached society. Julian refused to celebrate their disgrace. He accepted responsibility for the estate and promised Edmund that silence would never again masquerade as peace. Edmund came to Bellmere carrying the restored deeds. He looked older than his years. "I thought a quiet house meant you were safe," he told Rosalie. "It meant I had learned suffering made less noise than complaint." His tears did not repair her childhood, but for once he did not ask her to comfort him. He placed the documents in her hands and accepted that forgiveness could not be demanded by a father any more than by a duke. Octavia arrived days later in a plain carriage. She wore no jewels and brought no attendants. Entering the bakery, she knelt before Rosalie while flour dust floated through the morning light. "I believed Beatrice because her lie resembled my fear," Octavia said. "Then I remained silent because confession would reveal what I had done." "Do you regret losing Nathaniel's wife?" Rosalie asked, "or hurting an innocent woman?" Octavia's composure fractured. At first the former. Every day since the latter. Rosalie did not raise her or offer absolution. She simply nodded, granting Octavia the dignity of being heard but not the comfort of escaping consequence. That evening, Nathaniel found Rosalie in the empty bakery, closing her mother's silver recipe book. "I cannot restore 5 years," he said. "But if any love remains, marry me again." Rosalie's hand tightened upon the book. "Truth has explained your absence. It has not erased it. I will not return because you feel guilty or because society has cleared my name." Nathaniel absorbed the refusal without argument. He removed the Blackwood signet ring and placed it upon the wooden table between them. "Keep it, sell it, or throw it into the sea. I will never make your freedom another bargain." Rosalie stood alone listening to the rain. She had expected persuasion, authority, perhaps another promise shaped like a command. Instead, Nathaniel had surrendered the one thing he once guarded above love: control. When Lily entered searching for her mother, she found Rosalie beside the cold oven with the signet ring closed inside her palm. "Are we going to his castle?" Lily asked. Rosalie looked toward the doorway through which Nathaniel had disappeared. For the first time, returning to Blackwood did not resemble surrender. It resembled a choice, and choices she had learned could change the meaning of home. Rosalie entered Blackwood Castle holding Lily's hand, with Grace and Margaret beside her and Theodore balanced upon her arm. 5 years earlier, she had departed before dawn believing herself a burden. Now Nathaniel waited beneath the stone archway, making no claim upon her. "The rooms are prepared," he said. "Stay 1 night or 1 year. The choice remains yours." The children conquered the castle before caution could restrain them. Lily explored the battlements, Grace counted portraits, and Margaret invaded the kitchens to judge their pastry roses. Theodore scattered crumbs for garden birds and shouted whenever they followed him. Laughter traveled through corridors built to magnify silence. Octavia approached them slowly. She taught Grace simple melodies upon the piano, permitted Margaret to fasten blue ribbons across her severe black gown, and followed Lily through muddy gardens without complaining about her shoes. Theodore lifted his arms toward her and said, "Grandmama." Octavia gathered him close. Tears crossed the face that had once seemed carved from marble. During a winter gathering at Blackwood, Beatrice entered the hall with Cecilia and declared that Theodore was Nathaniel's illegitimate son. She accused Rosalie of deceiving Percival, fabricating abandonment, and returning to claim a second fortune. Nathaniel stepped forward, but Rosalie raised one hand. "You built your life by deciding which children possessed value," Rosalie said. "First Julian because he was an heir. Then me because I could be traded. You will not measure my children." Beatrice smiled. "A speech cannot alter blood." "No," Julian answered from the doorway. "But evidence can expose a lie." He carried Percival's journal and a sealed declaration discovered among the Ashford trustees' records. Percival admitted knowing of Rosalie's pregnancy before expelling her. His pages confessed shame for rejecting his daughters and legally recognized Lily, Grace, Margaret, and Theodore as his children. Beatrice seized for the papers, but Edmund stopped her. "You taught me to mistake obedience for peace," he said. "You will never command my house again." Beatrice left beneath the gaze of those she had manipulated, defeated not by scandal alone but by the family members who finally refused silence. Nathaniel turned to the assembled household, intending to dismiss them. Rosalie touched his arm. "Let them remain." She faced the room with the Blackwood signet ring resting in her palm. "I will marry Nathaniel again," she said. "Not because I require protection and not because truth has erased our wounds. I choose him because he has learned that love without trust is only possession, and because he now understands that a family is cherished, not inherited." Their wedding took place beneath winter sunlight in the glasshouse. The triplets carried roses through evergreen branches. Theodore guarded the rings until a bird startled him, whereupon he dropped the cushion into the snow. Nathaniel retrieved it laughing, and the sound seemed to free the castle from its oldest sorrow. Afterward, he legally adopted all 4 children. When trustees suggested Theodore should receive the largest inheritance because he was male, Nathaniel dismissed the proposal. "My son will possess enough," he said. "My daughters will never be taught they were born lesser." Independent trusts were established for Lily, Grace, and Margaret. Rosalie moved her bakery into a restored village building near Blackwood. Its windows glowed before dawn, and women seeking second beginnings continued finding work there. Her mother's recipe book remained upon the counter, no longer merely a relic of lost love, but the foundation of love passed onward. One rainy evening, Rosalie sat beside the fire with 4 children gathered around her, recreating the sight that had once stunned Nathaniel into silence. He paused inside the open palace doors, rain silvering the darkness behind him. This time, Theodore abandoned his painted bowl and ran toward him. Nathaniel knelt, caught the boy, and opened his other arm as the triplets followed. Rosalie rose and extended her hand. He accepted it without pulling, waiting until she stepped forward freely. Behind them, Octavia unlocked the nursery sealed since Rosalie's departure. Warm light spilled across 4 waiting beds, painted toys, and walls covered with flowers. Blackwood's bells began to ring. Not for the preservation of a title. Not for the birth of an heir. They rang for 3 daughters once dismissed as failures, a little boy once treated as property, a duke who chose humility over pride, and a woman no bargain could ever own again. For the first time in generations, Blackwood Castle celebrated not an heir, but a family, and every open door answered with laughter.